You're watching Hoddle, the show where first-year international students in Melbourne get real, honest advice from people who were once exactly where you are today. I'm your host, Chirag Agarwal, and today's guest has a story every international student should hear. He came to Australia from Delhi as an international student, managed to get interviews at Oliver Wyman and Deloitte, and got rejected. After graduation, he spent 8 months facing rejection before landing his first break in consulting, where he learned how to sell yourself on paper. That lesson helped him become a project manager with the NSW government, save over $100,000, $20,000, and later build my first Australian offer, helping hundreds of international students land jobs across Australia. He's a LinkedIn top voice, founder, and one of the most honest voices for international students. Please welcome Utkarsh Manocha. Hello, Utkarsh. It's
Thank
very
you.
nice to meet you.
Likewise, Chirag. Thank you so much for this lovely introduction. You could see me smiling every now and then, right?
Yeah, we love that.
Yeah.
So we'll get straight into the question. Okay, so Utkarsh, you often describe your early job hunting days in Australia as being like the New Zealand cricket team, always making the finals but never winning the trophy. You had the master's degree, you had the internships, but the rejections email kept coming. What was going through your head during those 8 months of silence after graduation?
Yep. First thing being like New Zealand is one of my favorite countries, and the cricket team as well. Like the New Zealand cricket team, right? It is one of my favorite cricket teams after obviously India.
Yeah.
The entire rationale here, I think I put that story out, like I put that thought out for the first time last year, which was what I felt in the moment in 2016 and 17, right? Because like a huge part of the journey, just like in any sort of tournament, is to get to the semifinals or the finals,
Yeah.
right? And I felt that my job search journey had gotten to a point where I was reaching those final round interviews. I remember that Oliver Wyman at one point in time flew me from Canberra to Sydney to interview with them, right? So my hopes were very high at that point in time. My friends, their hopes were very high at that point in time. And when such an opportunity does not go ahead, right, due to any sort of reason, I'm pretty sure they had their own reasons, they had better candidates, but you, like, when it doesn't go well for the first time, right, when you take that hit, that is fine. When it doesn't go for the second time, I think at that point in time and any time after that, you start questioning yourself, right, whether you are good enough. And that is the point where all these self doubts start coming into picture, in which is what we see with students when I speak with them in graduates as well. So I think in hindsight, it is just about controlling what you can control. So you can play well enough, right? You can do these things well enough. As long as you make sure that you are putting in your best foot forward, it does not matter. It does not matter that companies many times will find another candidate who would suit their needs a bit better. But yeah, knowing what I know now, I think one of the things there is control what you can control, and then the things that you can't control, no matter how frustrating that gets.
Yeah, from hearing experience, like if I'm being flown out for an interview, I think like I've got the job. This is just a formality. But then, that like disruption in your, like, in your career must have really like gotten to you, right? Like how do you navigate that? How do you overcome it?
You just so with anything, I feel like there are two things that you can do to
Hmm.
move on. Essentially, right. One of them is when we talk about moving on in some of the emotional aspects. We can talk about therapy particularly.
Hmm.
For me, it was more so about taking action
Hmm.
because we just didn't have time. So once you graduate, you pretty much know that you're on a ticking clock on a 485 visa. You want to land a job, you want to get your permanent residency. I think I am someone where when I am taking action, it reduces my anxiety a
Hmm.
lot more. So that was the entire part of it. That is something that I discovered back then as well. That hey, we've gotten this rejection. Let's be sad over it for a week, but after that you just got to pick yourself up and start looking into other companies.
Okay, so you just like, give your time to grief because it is a setback, but then quickly move on because you don't want to waste the time and opportunity you have at that given moment. You should just then go to the next application. There will be a job, and that gets to our next question. You eventually got that first break in Canberra. You said that job wasn't just a paycheck; it was where you learned how to sell yourself on paper. What was the one realization you had in that boutique consulting firm that changed how you approach your own career?
Yep. So the name of the company was Noetic Group.
Hmm.
I joined them back in 2018. Right now, their LinkedIn page does not exist anymore, which used to be.
Okay.
So I'm not sure whether they're still in existence,
Hmm.
particularly,
Hmm.
right? But this is something that has happened in Canberra a lot more, where the consulting sector has taken a hit, and a lot of boutique consulting companies, which were 15 people, 20 people. Noetic at that point in time, we grew all the way to 60 people for that matter.
Wow.
But
Okay.
then, because of the change of government, some policies around the consulting sector overall taking a hit, I feel that the consulting sector overall is in a flux right now, especially in Canberra. Moving on to the question, right, that we had here. So, selling yourself on paper, because I was on a 485 visa, essentially, I was basically hired because the director, the CEO of the company liked me, right? There was no other case around why I was hired. They couldn't put me on projects because in federal government, most of your projects are with Department of Defense and Department of Home Affairs, where as someone who does not have a security clearance, you do not fit and you can't enter the premises, essentially. Right. So that was pretty much the case. So when I was, and because I was on their books, the basic work that I had in consulting was writing tender documents so that the company could win more projects. And that was my biggest learning in terms of just seeing how to sell yourself on paper. Because I'd work with all these principal consultants and I'd work with all these directors. And the only thing that I would help them with is brainstorming in a way how to present yourself on paper. What's the business case? Why would a Department of Defense hand over a project to a 40 people consulting group rather than Deloitte? What
Hmm.
is our unique value proposition there? And that is where I essentially learned that skill from, which I feel is something that I'm carrying on even right now, right? Which is just empowering people around how to sell yourself on paper, in person, right? That is what finding a job in a way is.
Hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So on that 485 visa, a lot of international students in Melbourne, particularly, are obsessed with the Big Four or management consulting. As you said, Deloitte. You got into consulting on a 485 visa, so you know it is possible. But you also warn students against making it their only focus. Why do you call that playing the career game on super hard mode?
Because like point blank, because it is very very competitive, and it is, there are things there which are outside your power of control, which is what we exactly discussed first through, right?
Yeah.
So I feel that when you're starting off your career, right, consulting in a way, like Australian consulting industry is so small that I feel it is competitive for anyone, for that
Hmm.
matter, domestic, right? Even if you've got a security clearance, for that matter, it is competitive, right? Because everyone wants to work with these bigger firms.
Hmm.
For international students, I feel it is even more competitive. And I think one of the things that you shouldn't do is make it even harder by selecting that, hey, there are four companies that I want to work with, and they are essentially EY, PwC, Deloitte, and KPMG. That is making things even harder for yourself. And none of that is to say that you cannot get into these companies, right? That is not something that I'm implying, because like we have, at my first Australian offer, we've got community members, we've got people who've made their way into these companies in a consulting related role. So it is possible. The entire thing is that we do not want to make it our only option, because that again, the same thinking, that is playing your career game on a very very hard mode.
Hmm.
And the last thing I want for international students is that you're 2 years on a 485 visa, right? They go by very very fast. They go quicker than you'll ever realize.
Hmm.
So the entire point of it is that, let's not, I would rather that you get into a boutique consulting company or something that gets you into a consulting company 2 months after your uni, rather than keep looking for jobs for 10 months, 12 months, 16 months after your graduation, because that is doing a disservice to yourself, I feel.
Okay, so from what I understand is we focus on the big four or the top firms so much that we actually lose out on the other consulting boutique firms, where we could have a shot at getting job and then getting the experience that could maybe land us a job at the big four later. But then in those initial 2 years that we just have where we are starting out, it's very hard to actually get a role there. But if you get the skills in a boutique firm, you can then maybe grow into those roles later on in your life. So it does make sense where you just have to like widen your horizon instead of just focusing on like the big names. Focus on the work that you want to do, the skills you actually want to develop, which will then later help you in your career. So it's all about just getting started and not being stuck. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. You recently shared 10 things you wish you knew when you started working at 23. One that stands out to me is managers love people who ask questions and speak up in meetings. For a first year student who might be coming from a culture where speaking up to seniors is seen as disrespectful, how do they bridge that gap that started from uni, to office?
Mhm. I think you're absolutely right in putting that out that it is a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because certainly for me, it was like coming from like spending my entire life till the age of 21 years in Delhi. Right, we've got a culture wherein we just call our seniors with sir. So the inherent notion there is, in the things that we've learned, especially growing up, is we don't question our professors, we don't question our managers. You put your head down, you do the work, and you expect that you will get noticed somehow. Right, that is usually the culture there. One of the things when you start working in Australia that you realize very early on is that most managers here, most of the bosses that you'll have, they will want you to challenge the status quo and they would want you to ask questions. Right, that is the reason why you are hired, which is that, hey, I've got a particular way of thinking, I am proposing that thinking. Your job, the way I look at it, is not just to put your head down and to agree with whatever I'm saying. You need to ask me questions to validate whether my thinking is on the right track, whether it is to propose new ideas as to, hey, there is an alternative way of doing this, Utkarsh. Have you actually thought about this? Is this something that we've already considered in our way of working? Right. So that is what it comes down to. As a student, I feel a great way of doing that essentially is just being involved in more and more work in your time as a student, right? Essentially, the more work that you do with Australians, with people from diverse countries who belong to another culture as you pick up this style, you understand that this is a thing, and you adapt to it accordingly. The worst thing is basically just being in a group of people where everyone has a similar mindset or has a similar background to what you have, because there everyone thinks of things the same way and you're more likely to follow it, and then when you get into the workforce it feels like a huge surprise for you that, hey, this is something that I've never heard of, or this is something that I've never considered. Whereas yeah, asking questions is one of those things, which is a very, very cultural thing. In Asian countries, we are not huge on asking questions. We are not huge on challenging our parents, challenging our teachers, professors, challenging people who we look up to. Here in Australia, you are encouraged. Even if you look up to people, you ask them questions, you challenge them, you challenge their thinking. As long as it's done respectfully, everyone wants you to do that.
And I've also lived in Delhi for 5 years, and there the culture that was instilled in me was like you call your teachers ma'am or sir. So either you say ma'am or you say sir. And then when I came to Australia, the first thing they told me was, "Why are you calling me ma'am? Am I old?" The first thing they said, "Call me by my name." You can add a Mister if you want to, or Mrs. if you want to, but call me by my name. And that's like, it instantly clears the gap. Now there's a relationship where you're not like a senior to me. You're like someone that's teaching me something. And another advice that you gave was really good is, viewers, if you're listening, if you are a student and you're going to university, try make friends from people from other cultures. Okay, try expand your circle, and then don't have the same mindset, the same culture that you already grew up in. You know, university is the best time where you can develop these skills without having any consequences where, like, if you're a job and you're learning those skills, it might impact your work. So this is the best time to actually learn those skills. Ask your teachers questions, ask your professors questions, ask them on a particular theory that you don't know, instead of like being quiet, engage with them. And as Utkarsh said, they love it. They feel it becomes more humanized in a way where you're like collaborating with me instead of me just teaching you like a robot. Um, okay, pretty good. You've coached hundreds of international students throughout your program. When they first reach out to you, what are the most common things you find they're lacking, whether it's a mindset or specific skill, and how do you work with them to bridge that gap?
Yeah, I don't view this particular thing as students or anyone lacking any particular thing. I
Okay.
feel at this point in time, with the amount of information that is prevailing out there, I feel that there is a component of being overwhelmed by certain things, being overwhelmed as to how to do a particular thing, how to market yourself on paper, right? What other things is it? What is the role of AI in screening my application? Right, questions like these, where there's a lot of noise, where there's a lot of information around. The other aspect here specifically is around that aspect of just things have become more competitive. So I feel with things being more competitive, with overall there just being more competition around, people reach out to us for that. They, hey, how do we cut through the noise? How do I know that the thing that I'm doing is actually the right thing? And if I just stick with it, I will get the results. So there's everything, right? In a way, like I've worked with students who were the best students technically, but there was, let's say, a very minor thing in terms of how they were presenting themselves, right, on paper and in person in interviews, which was proving to be a big hindrance. Then I've also coached and I've also worked with students where it was more about figuring out why is something not working out for us, right? Why is it that, hey, we have got overseas experience, but we're still not able to get hired in Australia because everyone here is asking us for Australian experience. And in the time that we were a student, we didn't manage to land an internship. And that is being the biggest hindrance for our job search at this point in time. So I would say, like, just being overwhelmed by the things that you have to figure out as a student, and just the general competition that is there around in terms of breaking into the industry, um, is are probably the most concerning factors that students have, as a result of which they get in touch with us.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. We'll get to the right lightning round of our podcast. One word to describe the Australian job market right now.
Australian job market right now, I would say, let's go with competitive,
Competitive.
very competitive.
Okay, very
Yep.
competitive. If a student has only 15 minutes a day for their career, should they spend it on LinkedIn or polishing the CV?
I would, so I feel both are equally important, but 15 minutes a day, I would go with LinkedIn just as a personal preference, because resume, CV, you've got it one page on paper. You don't want to refine it every day,
Hmm.
spending 15 minutes on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the most daily thing you still do in Australia?
I watch such crappy shows, right? I watch all the crappy shows that I used to watch when I was 15, that used to come on MTV, like MTV, the Roadies, Splitsvilla. So all of those crappy junk shows that none of the people around me watch anymore, I still watch it because, yeah, if it's crap, I would probably like it.
Okay. Finish this sentence. An international student's biggest advantage in Australia is?
Being from a different culture.
Okay, that's a strength. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yes.
Okay, Utkarsh, if there is one student watching this in the first semester at university, feeling overwhelmed by the cost of living and the fear of not finding a job, what is the one thing you want them to do before they go to sleep tonight?
I would focus on, so before they go to sleep tonight, noting that we are recording this at 9:30 p.m. Right? It would be, I would say that, hey, maybe not today, but tomorrow. What I would think about is I would just focus in on taking action, because I feel that is how you just reduce. That is just how you get one step closer towards progress. Right now, in terms of taking action for yourself, it could be working on your resume, it could be working on your LinkedIn profile, it could be upskilling yourself technically by doing a technical project, it could be reaching out to someone for advice, right? Reaching out to someone who you consider a mentor, or maybe even going to a office hour session with a course convener, or a tutor, or someone who teaches you, a professor, right? And ask and starting to build a relationship with them, because again, that would be very, very fruitful. So yeah, in a sentence, I would just say that take action that is related to your career.
Okay. So, viewers, in each podcast, the most common theme is take action. Okay, get out of your room and get out of your comfortable zone and just participate. Take advantage of every opportunities universities give you. There are a lot of programs like Study Melbourne that help you develop skills, you know. It's very important that you have to get out of your mind and actually take some initiative, and there will be a snowball effect where slowly you'll get better at what you were scared of, and then you will be more confident, which will then showcase will have effects on your life, which can impact your career and your life in general. So Utkarsh, thank you genuinely. You've taken every rejection, every final round, no offer moment, and turned into a roadmap for thousands of students. That's not something everyone would do, and I think everyone watching appreciates it. If you're watching this and Utkarsh said something that hit you, whether it was whether it was about speaking up or selling yourself on paper, or just about being okay with the slow start, you can connect with him directly on LinkedIn. His LinkedIn will be in the description, and feel free to reach out either to me or to Utkarsh for any questions. Thank you, Utkarsh. It was lovely having you.
Fantastic. Likewise. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ram.